Welcome to the Unwanted Fraternity podcast. Greg Tonkinson here along with my co-host and wife, Jen Tonkinson. We are thrilled that you are joining us for this episode because we get to talk yet once again about such an important topic, and that is counseling. Before we get to that, huge shout out to the Herzog Foundation. We have now begun a partnership with the Herzog Foundation on the Unwanted Fraternity podcast, as well as our sister podcast, Meliora the podcast. Listen, if you are a Christian educator, if you're a parent, if you are a youth pastor, if you are concerned about the next generation and equipping them to become culture changers for Christ, you want to head over to herzogfoundation.com/podcasts. They have done such a great job in providing resources and tools and helpful ways that you can now minister to the next generation. So go onto their website, hit up their podcast, look at all of what they offer, not just their podcast, but they have a bevy of resources waiting for you and for me to approach that next generation all shored up. Well, we are excited here once again at Tonks Pub because Tonks Pub hosts every one of our episodes, and we couldn't thank them enough. And more than that, we are super excited because we are here talking with someone, as we mentioned in our last episode, we were going to talk to people not just about counseling, but experiential knowledge because these people have been in counseling or currently are in counseling.
Yes, I'm excited about this series that we're in because I think it's important to really just touch on these things that people really don't feel comfortable talking about, which is getting counseling and making that first step to healthy thinking. And so today we have a special guest, our son, Bailey Tonkinson. Thank you for joining us, Bailey.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be seated in Tonks Pub.
And I think it's really just very awesome of you to be able to come on to our show and be just candid about your experiences with obviously going through what we've already talked about with, blended families and loss and grief and how, you've walked through that as a child. We had you on an earlier podcast talking about your experience and your perspective going through that. And so we were grateful for that. But now you're going to kind of get us into your headset or mindset of like, what was it like making that step to go get counseling, and what are your thoughts behind anyone getting started in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to be here. I am your son, so I didn't really have an option to say no, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm very excited to get to talk today and open up a little bit.
So one of the things that we mentioned in our last episode was not only is there a stigma, but when you look at Christian circles, Bailey, and I would even say the added layer to that would be age, that when you run with the Gen Z crowd, is it your estimation that there still is a stigma within the Gen Z crowd when you mention something like, hey, where are you going? Like, let's go play basketball or let's go play guitar or whatever. Hey, I'm going to counseling. Does that just roll off the tongue, or is that still met with, man, should I be saying this or not?
Yeah, I think it depends on what circle you're in, because I think the issue with Gen Z is that we've taken it to two different extremes. So I think there's a side of we really glorify and praise mental health issues, and we've talked about that before. I think we talked about it in the last podcast that I was on, and the rise in mental health issues amongst our generation. But at the same time, I think it's also the opposite. I think we've hard-headed it a little bit and gotten so to the other side of the aisle, and the pendulum has swung back towards you just need to tough it out. So I definitely think there is a stigma with it. But I think a lot of it's just you have to drop your pride. Like, there's a lot of pride involved with admitting you need somebody else to talk you through your issues.
Yeah.
It's easy as a Christian to say, well, like Romans 8:28, like, God gives me strength. I should be able to fight this on my own. And that is true. That all stands. But at the same time, it's really helpful to go to other humans that are professionals and open up to them, because they can walk you through some of the stuff that you need to talk about.
Sure. So when I want you to walk us through, for our listeners, maybe walk us through the past 24 months or so, and why did you at at 21, 20 years old, why did you decide to enter into counseling?
Absolutely. It has been about 3 years now. Or about 2 years. It was the summer of 2023. And I just got really closed off going into college, and I wasn't talking to people about what was going on.
So you graduated
from high school in 2022.
2022.
Sorry, this is the
fall of 22.
Fall of 22.
Okay.
And I was very closed off, but I think part of it was moving out, going to college, living my own life kind of deal. And that first semester of college is when it went downhill a little bit, and then went through some ugly stuff, some life issues, going into the beginning of 2023. And that's when it really took a turn for the worse. Not only my life decisions, but that all affected my mental health. And I wasn't opening up to people about it. You guys had no clue. My friends had no clue. Everyone around me had no clue, because I didn't feel a need to share, because I'm strong enough and big enough to fight this on my own with the Lord. And that just wasn't the case in that situation. Yeah.
So what happened there? Did you reach a break point? Did you reach a moment of crisis? What was that factor that pushed you through toward, I've got to go get some help?
I don't think everyone needs to have a breaking point. I think you don't need to be at the lows of life to decide you need counseling. In fact, I recommend it to my friends that are in a very good state of life, that are just maybe walking through something a little difficult, that maybe just a parent can't help you through, where you should seek professional advice. But in my case, it was a breaking point. I remember coming home after my freshman year of college, pretty distraught. And I think it was the conversation I had with you guys, where I just kind of opened up about everything, because I think we can only bottle up so much, to where that emotion, that trauma starts to store up. It affects you physically, mentally, spiritually. And I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I opened up to you guys about everything. And you guys had even noticed that even through the later half of high school, I really wouldn't share anything. And that's just kind of how I thought things went. I thought that's what my older brother did. I thought that's what I should do, because I'm a man. And then through that conversation, part of that involved wise advice from you guys of, you should look into counseling, because it sounds like it's some deep-rooted stuff, not just confessions you need to make.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
Why do you think I want to go back to something before we get on to like more in depth of what you learned in counseling, but what do you think has caused your generation to, you said the pendulum kind of has swung back to this, I want to be a man, I want to be strong. It's interesting, because I would say it's not been long since I've seen so many people championing this idea of having this, like, I have mental health issues. I want to tell the world about it. I'm okay to be vulnerable. And now you're saying you feel like that it's coming back to like, no, let's be more closed off and not share that again. What has happened with your generation in that?
Definitely. I'd say it's more in the Christian circles than anything that this is happening. I think it's just, you get sick of seeing one extreme for so long. It happens in politics, it happens in religion, it happens all the time, where it goes too far the other way. You get so sick of it, you try to middle it out, and that ends up pushing it too far the other way. So I think mental health got to become such a popular thing in good and bad ways, that people just got sick of it. Like stop using this as an excuse. We've talked about that plenty of times. These things do exist, but why have the percentages doubled and tripled in the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah.
Part of it is research and study and whatever, but another part of it is just everyone has it now because we're giving it out.
Yeah.
Like candy. And people just got sick of it. And I think the groups I'm around felt the same way. Sometimes, especially because social media is dominated by a certain group, it stays that way. It's still on the side of let's champion mental health. And when I say that, I don't mean that in a positive way. There's nothing wrong with champion mental health, but I mean glorifying it. But yeah, I'd say it's definitely been noticeable that there's less and less people that are bragging almost about the mental health struggles that they have.
Do you think that people have just maybe come into a realization that they do need help, and so they've reached out and had healthy conversations and then maybe put some things in place? Or do you think they've actually just stopped talking about it because it's not popular anymore?
Here's the option C. I just think they never had it and people stopped giving them attention. So they don't want to talk about it.
It's a bold statement.
No, it's true for a lot of people. I mean, you look around at people that, I mean, you probably had so many students, probably more so when you were teaching in high school, that claim all these disorders, and you're giving out extra days for tests and stuff. And there are a lot of people that need that. And that's so, so, so important. I'm glad we have accommodations. But at the same time, those same people, why aren't you talking about it anymore? Did it go away magically? No. And yeah, if you get counseling, it can really help and improve with that. And we'll get into more of my story later. But at the same time, it's also just because it's not as popular anymore. It's not cool. It's not trendy anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why you don't hear it as much. But at the same time, yes, I agree. I think more people just got help for it. But I don't think I don't know the numbers, but I don't think counseling has seen a rise in the last 5 years other than mental health. People or patients with mental health have gone up.
Yeah. I mean, I think that because of technology and the accessibility to my life now, more and more people are sharing more and more things about their life. And I think that even at the very low level of, hey, admit you need help, has benefited a great number of people by just feeling free that, wow, that felt good just to admit I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And maybe that could have been that's all they needed was just to admit it and have people pray for them or whatnot. And then it does, scaffold up to serious, issues that require counseling. So that when you decided, Bailey, that, hey, this is something I'm going to do, walk us through I guess it'd be a 19, 20-year-old at that time, walk us through, where do you even start to look for a counselor? How do you pay for counseling? Because I think that a lot of our listeners just want to get down to, great, I'm sold, like I need counseling. I don't even know where, gone are the yellow pages. What do I do?
It's definitely daunting because you're getting into a whole new medical program that you don't know anything about. Jen and I looked at different counselors around the area. We wanted a Christian counselor. We wanted a male counselor because you can go different ways with that. I would highly recommend that. Pick someone that's the same gender, not only mainly just for the relatability factor. They know what it's like to be in your shoes more than the opposite gender would. And to me, that just felt really healthy. And then also a Christian counselor, because their worldview is so much different. So there are times where my counselor looked at me and said, this is something you just have to, and to me, it felt like he was just finding a cheap way out of it sometimes, but he truly was great. But you just have to rely on the Lord for this. This is something that I can't really help you with.
Yeah.
Like this is something you rely on the Lord, and a secular counselor won't be able to say that. They're going to try to find other ways to solve it that won't help you as much as God's going to help you.
Yeah, it's so you guys do some research, you ask friends, however it may be, you land on someone. Mm-hmm. You have to make that initial phone call. Is there a screening process when you make that initial phone call?
So I believe it was an initial counseling meeting.
Okay.
It was an actual session.
Okay.
So I go in and I'm nervous as all get out.
Was it complimentary at the initial one, or was it kind of like?
I don't think so.
All right, I'm curious.
I think we knew we were.
There was a consultation time.
Maybe that's what it was. Maybe it was a free meeting.
It's like a phone consultation, and then
it wasn't. It was in person. I remember meeting him. But yeah, I would say it was free consultation.
Okay.
But different places are different, so it probably varies.
Yeah.
And that first session was all about not getting into the thick of it, because this isn't a counseling session. It's just let's get to know each other. Yeah. And the whole time they're taking notes and they're just learning about you. And then at that point, you get to decide, is this the person I want to rock with? Because one thing I think the problem people have with counseling is like how some Christians deal with church right now. They want something that fits exactly what they want. Everyone's going to have a negative. No counselor is going to be perfect, just like no church is perfect. And a lot of people will get so deep into counseling and then they'll switch a counselor every month. Well, the part of the counseling that I had to learn was those first couple sessions, you may not learn a whole ton or get out a whole ton or feel a ton better, because things like that take time.
Sure.
Like they need to dig deep into what they need to tell you as well.
Yeah. Was he asking you, let's just, tell me about your story, tell me about your life. Let's
More just details. It was literally down to, how many siblings do you have? and then you write them down.
Mm.
What are their names? What are their ages?
Yeah.
Where do you sit in the family?
Yeah.
Parental status,
Yeah.
grandparent, like extended family.
Does he ask kind of the meta question, like, why are you here? Or like, is
I
it?
think it's more of, in a way, it's what do you want to get out of this? Because
Okay.
their goal, a good counselor's goal should be to get you out of there as quick as they can.
Sure.
Not so that you feel kicked to the curb. But if you're in counseling for a specific reason for more than that allotted time, someone's messing up. And it's either the counselor or it's you. Because I know way too many people that'll sit in counseling for years on end. And again, there's so many cases where it's justified and needed. But a lot of times counseling should have an end date.
We're going to have some counselors on. I'm interested as to their
Hopefully
take
they
on
agree.
that.
Hopefully they agree.
Well,
I
has.
think it is situational based on why you're in counseling. I think some people are in
Sure.
counseling for maybe a chronic mental illness, like something that's
Right.
ongoing and they constantly need help for it.
Right.
But in my case, I was going for a specific reason. It was a period and season of my life.
Right.
And I think that's probably more the majority. I may be speaking out of turn. But the majority of people I know that have gone through counseling, it was for a season. And they got out, whether that was 3 years or 2 months.
Right.
It was a season.
And how long was your counseling again? I can't
About a
remember.
year.
About a year.
About
okay.
a year.
And I think it's fair in that initial consult to ask, hey, based on my situation, I'm interested to know, how long do you think, like asking the counselor, how long do you think it might last? Because I would have no idea if you go in for, acute depression versus I broke up with my girlfriend or something like I think that they've been doing this long enough to have a ballpark.
Yeah,
you
but
know what I mean?
that's the issue with counseling is no one's ever fully honest right away. So even with my counselor, I knew what I was going in for, and I didn't even know how much more was going to get uncovered.
Sure.
Not that I was hiding stuff.
Yeah,
from
that's
them,
true, actually.
But they find there's
Right.
so many more deep-rooted
Yeah.
issues in all of us
Right.
that have caused these issues now.
That's true.
That it does take probably more time than you expect. Like
Right.
if it's a breakup,
Yeah.
maybe the trauma you're experiencing from that is because of a past trauma that you now need to work through with your
Yeah.
counselor.
When I went to counseling, I was telling this on the last podcast that I walked in with this like assumption that this was my problem. The obvious was I got divorced, and so I want to work through those feelings. But when I was sitting there talking to the counselor, there were so many more things that came out, like
Yeah.
it surfaced. Was that kind of your experience as
Definitely. Oh my gosh. And it started with one issue. I don't know how much you want to get into the actual counseling process yet, or if you want to save that, but
Go for it.
well?
yeah. It started with an ugly breakup, and that's just how it started. Like it started with, let's talk about this. And I really thought going in that this was going to be a magic pill and that I was going to be fixed in a month. Mm-hmm. I think it was 3 months in when he told me I had mild depression and mild anxiety. And that like wrecked me. And I realized that there were so many more deep-rooted issues than I thought. But it started with that. And then that moved into other issues in my life I was dealing with. Why I fell into the rut I fell in my freshman year of college. That eventually led back to what had happened with my mom and the trauma that was caused from that. And I'd never gotten counseling from that. So I'd never actually fully worked through trauma. And trauma is such a weird thing because it's not only a mental thing you deal with, but it's physical. Humans store trauma physically. It takes a physical toll on your body, and then you compartmentalize that. And then when other things come up, it'll hurt even more. It's like when I went through my breakup and that rejection, he was able to pull similar feelings I had from when my mom passed away and relate that. And sometimes I'm a logical person. I'm a logical thinker. Having logic behind why I feel this way, or why am I responding this way, when normally you don't really know, but you're having someone there to tell you. He wasn't always giving me every answer because they can't read your mind.
Yeah.
But it was extremely helpful in that way. And towards the end, a lot of the counseling was just working through the trauma of losing my mom. And then he actually was able to get down to the root that the breakup I'd gone through was also considered or classified as trauma. So it was a traumatic experience.
Yeah.
So those are the two most major traumatic experiences I had been through in my life. And I just have no clue what I would have done without counseling to walk through those.
We're here at the Tonks Pub with Unwanted Fraternity, speaking with Bailey Tonkinson about counseling. And Bailey, certainly appreciate your time, your vulnerability. What did you leave those sessions? Was it draining? Was it cathartic? Could you do a session backed up against another appointment? Did you need some time in some space?
Yeah,
How'd that
that's a
work?
great question. It sucked. There were points where I didn't look forward to it, even though I knew I was getting helped. It's like getting a filling put in for a cavity.
Why?
Because a big part of working through these issues, I thought, was going to be the counselor telling you exactly how to fix it and what to change in your own mind. But a lot of it was a big way, and hopefully the other counselors approve of this, but a big way you work through trauma, I forgot the term for it, but you relive it. You talk about it. You talk about your feelings you were going through. So some of our sessions, when we got deeper into it, and some of them I left feeling fine. Like some of them I left even feeling like, I don't think that did anything.
Yeah.
But it's because I needed to trust the process and get to these sessions where we would sit there, and this is actually something they do, but he gave me two remotes, two handles. And they would buzz just every once in a while like this, like in rhythm. It was a slight buzz. And you just grip them, close your eyes, and then he would have me recall a specific traumatic time. So not just a generalized thing like a breakup, but a specific instance in the breakup where I felt extreme anxiety and why'd that frustrate me. And then I just start talking about it. Mm-hmm. And the worst part of counseling is you want them to dig deep until they start digging deep. Mm-hmm. Because these are traumatic. These aren't fun experiences. This isn't Disneyland. So I'm walking through a situation.
It's not when you were on the Snoopy ride.
No.
At Disneyland.
When I was like 17. Right. He's walking you through and asking these questions about the situation and to explain exactly what was going on, like down to the setting, down to the time of day.
Yeah.
And then he's asking you, how do you feel in this moment? And then I would say some general thing, like I felt really angry. Why do you feel angry? Well, because this and this. Why did those things make you angry?
Keep pressing.
And all he's doing is asking these little questions to the point where I'm thinking, man, I can get this degree. No, I'm kidding. They're very trained. But he's asking these simple questions, and I'm just getting more and more and more and more frustrated and hurt and angry. And these feelings are just coming back. Because that's a big thing is we compartmentalize our feelings. We don't share them with other people, and they're just stored.
Yeah.
They're just in there. So his job there is just to get it out of me in order that I walk past it. Because one of the big things I was struggling with is when I would have memories or have these feelings that brought me back to those traumatic experiences, I would softly relive that trauma just from a sensory reliving, whether it was seeing an old picture or smelling an old scent that I recognize. It would instantly turn on this switch of overwhelming anxiety, and I would freak out. That's not normal. Right. Well, it's just because I had never let those feelings go.
Right.
So he's walking me through that, getting it out of me. And that just was so extremely beneficial. But those sessions I left, and I would purposely leave an hour in my day to not schedule anything. There were multiple sessions where I left and would break down in my car or just being so much like hurt that I would need to just go take time for myself.
Yeah.
But it was all so worth it and so healthy. Later on, and I mentioned the 2 diagnoses before, but he actually, and you guys know this well, but he ended up just bottling it all up into ADHD, which is a common, not misdiagnosis, but it's a common thing for people with extreme ADHD to show signs of depression and anxiety in different stages of life. And that's why he did that. And a lot of the issues and stuff I was dealing with was just rooted down to that, which really, really helped because there were a lot of things I felt like this isn't normal for people to think this way or act this way.
Sure.
And I can't explain why. And some of it's just because sometimes I'm lazy and I'm an idiot, just like the rest of us. But some of it was like, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, this helps me understand that as well.
I wanted to ask, we've talked about like getting young kids counseling, like when we were initially talking about our grief and loss that we didn't get my 2 kids counseling, but Dad had gotten you. And Caden and Malia a little bit of counseling, but looking back, do you think that you as a 6-year-old or maybe an 8-year-old should have started counseling earlier so that you would have like been able to process things? Or do you think you could have processed it at that age?
Yeah, I'm sure it helped at the time. I don't remember a lick of it.
I don't think you guys went that long.
Well, I think
3 or 4 sessions.
Yeah.
okay, but I think at the time that's probably what I needed. I think as a little kid, you just don't even understand or you can't comprehend at all what is going on.
Right.
So just someone to talk to you and just probably softly explain it to you.
Sure.
It's probably what happened.
Yeah.
And to walk through some of that stuff, but with a professional
Right.
kids counselor.
Yeah.
So I think that was extremely beneficial, but I think when it comes to the ages where you do understand or walking through these emotions, a big part of counseling is you can't just go in and expect them to fix all your issues.
Yeah.
You also have to participate. That's why I say you shouldn't sit in counseling for years and years and years, because you also have to put in work.
Yeah.
Like you also have to go
Sure.
along with what they're telling you to do, or you can just be defensive. Because if you guys force me into it, let's say like junior year of high school, and I'm dealing with issues, and I open up to you guys, and you guys say go to counseling, I say no, but you guys put me in it.
Right.
I can just be defensive with the counselor,
Right.
and nothing's going to get solved.
Well, we've experienced that with one of our other children.
Yeah.
And it just, you get out of it what you put into it for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
What would you say, Bailey, to parents where the situation is where the child actually does want to go to counseling and the child's coming home and they're, like you said, they're expressing different kinds of emotions post sessions. Sometimes they're happy, sometimes they're not, sometimes they're angry, sometimes they're just, introverted. As a parent, do you think that a lot of parents are looking at that from one angle, from one lens, which is, I need this to happen sooner than it's happening? Like, okay, my kid's been in counseling for 6 months. Yeah. I'm not seeing the grades improve. I'm not seeing the friendships improve. Like they're still up in their room, closed off. And this is costing money every single session, right?
Yeah.
What would your advice be to those parents?
Well, I think it's the biggest thing to look at first is you want to spend as much money to take care of yourself mentally, but it's expensive. Like it costs money. There were times where I'd cancel a session because I didn't want to pay for it, which is tough. You have to make that sacrifice, I guess. And then I would look outside and take a step back and think, one, I don't think counseling just solves your life. Like you said, you put in what you get out, but also even if you're putting in maximum effort, they can't clean your room for you or make you more social.
Right.
Like those are choices you have to make on your own. I think sometimes we give too much credit into counseling where we say, well, I'm going to counseling, so my life is okay. No, I still had to make active choices to open up to family members, to improve my life, even after being told, hey, you deal with ADHD or these are traumatic experiences. Because part of it is like they're there to maybe not boost you up, but you do get a bit of a ego feed of it's all about you.
Right.
Like, this isn't a friend relationship.
Right.
And that's their job. Like they're very clear on that.
Correct.
This is nothing but I'm your counselor. And that's another thing.
They're getting paid.
Never be friends with your counselor. That's that's very not okay.
Yep.
But
you can see how that happens
100%
because of the vulnerability.
Yeah. And I do think that's more on the counselor side. It takes some setting boundaries.
For sure.
Your counselor's there just to talk about you, not themselves.
Yep.
So when you're getting this, you're just getting talked about and you're getting told just about you, which is, as humans, we love to hear that. Sometimes you can feel like that's sufficient enough.
Yeah.
And after being told all that stuff, I realized that now it's my turn to go take all this money that I've pumped into counseling and go do something about it. And it's probably harder with a teenager, a high schooler.
Sure.
Some things you're not able to understand. Lucky enough, I was an adult at this point, so it really helped. I think it was great timing. And then also there's other areas of life that can affect behavior as a teenager. It's not just mental health. And that's why I say we give too much credit. And that's why the pendulum was so far on that side. If I was failing school and not doing well in life, I could just blame it on the fact that I maybe have depression. And it's like, especially when the counselor tells you that.
Right.
Some people take that and they'll weaponize it and they will make it their personality. And they'll let life slip because of it. Feels like a good excuse.
Yeah, and I think you bring up an astute point, which is, listen, all things being equal, if somebody said, hey, I'm going through some trauma, I've been through, I'm struggling. Okay, so what I want you to do is take a year off of life, go weekly to a counselor, and but that's not reality, right? And
exactly.
so during that season when someone is in counseling, best case scenario is no more is added to their plate by way of trials or conflict or pain. But who could predict that, right? So you could be right in the middle of being vulnerable. You're seeing progress. You're seeing some, mountains move a little bit. And then, some other tragedy comes your way. Some other loss comes your way. And how tempting it would be to give up everything that was gained.
Yeah.
And to feel like you're starting back at zero.
But that's also a beautiful part of counseling is they're not just looking at your past. They're helping you with how can you avoid or do better in these situations in the future.
Yeah.
So when I was walking through it, I did it for a year. It was probably 25, 30 sessions. It was every other week. And there were hardships that I went through. Maybe not as traumatic as the first two I was walking through with him. But there were times when I would legitimately recall my counselor told me that I normally would react this way with human behavior. Yeah. And here's how to avoid it.
Oh, there
here's
you go.
what I need to do to put this in place to not fall into a pit. Because that was my issue is when I'd hit a roadblock, instead of just going around it, I would just lay down right there and die.
Right.
And let that take over my life and I'd fall into these pits. And you guys had even said you noticed that when there were times where there were maybe a month period or a couple week period where I wouldn't be myself and it's because something was going on. And he showed me the ways to avoid that. And that was huge.
Yeah.
There were also times where I go through something hard and I would literally think I'm kind of excited to talk to my counselor about this. Like a friend said this to me, or I'm going on a date with this girl randomly, or it's like you kind of get excited to see what they're going to have to say about how you should respond, or maybe you responded better.
That's good.
Yeah.
So you get to about a year or so in. Walk us through then. When did you, both of you, either of you, neither of you, sense that this is kind of the plane starting to land?
Yeah, so this is where I failed. I didn't tell him. And that was really, really
What do you
poor on
mean?
my part. And we're on camera, we're on video. I could lie about this. I could say, it was perfect. To finish that story, it got a little repetitive. And I realized that when I thought about the breakup I had gone through, which at this point had been 2 years prior, and when it came to dealing with the situation with my mom, albeit still extremely difficult, I wasn't having those same responses I was. And then also just the fact that I was doing well in life and getting over those roadblocks. I wasn't letting them take me out.
Yeah.
And then I looked at my bank account and I said, this is $100 some odd a session. And the last probably 3 or 4 sessions had felt a little bit, I don't want to say not helpful, because again, my counselor is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love him. But they didn't feel like I was getting my money's worth, just because there wasn't much to talk about other than what had happened in the last 2 weeks every time we met.
Right.
So I kind of made the executive decision. I just didn't reschedule.
Stop going.
And I think counselors probably get that more than you'd think. There's probably never a formal, hey, this, by the way, is my last meeting. But hopefully that happens with more people, because I still do feel bad. Because sometimes when you do that to somebody, you realize, like maybe you forget, and then you realize a month out, shoot, I should have texted them, but now it's weird.
Right.
And then you wait another 3 months, and now it's really weird.
Yeah.
And then now it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
Well, now it's like, no, I definitely can't.
Well, and so there's a professional side of it where there is a service being rendered, and so it's not like a friend meeting up for coffee or something, you're just blowing off a friend. On the other hand, when you build a relationship with your counselor, I think just out of professional courtesy, there is a rationale to why you're going to stop. Yeah. And in your case, if correct me if I'm wrong, but not only had you been in counseling for a year, but your circumstances had changed by way of you weren't living in the same place. You weren't working in the same place. Like some variables changed that when you add the change of the variables plus counseling, I can see how you could wake up a year later and think, okay,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I'm back on
I
my
can't
feet.
pin it on any one thing. I'm just saying overall, life is better than it was a year ago.
Significantly.
And so you kind of wake up thinking, oh, I got to go to counseling again. And maybe that's just great wisdom for our listeners. Like, I don't think there's a hard and fast to, you know, like when you get a set of pills and it's like, you know, when you're done is when their bottle's empty,
Yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Counseling's really not like that.
Yeah.
It is, hey, this is a relationship we're working through, but
Some people
there's
do
no
set an end date. Some people say, I want to be done with this by this date.
Correct.
This many sessions. Not
And
that it's going to
so-
get fixed, but
right.
I'll have the knowledge and tools to fix it.
Right. Yeah. And so I think it's just really going into counseling, knowing that this is not like most things where it's like, let's set up 12 sessions, like physical therapy or something. Like we're going to do it for 12 sessions and then, but rather just kind of be in the moment and do what your counselor is asking you to do but understand it's a journey, it's a marathon, not a sprint. But at some point, I think that's good that I would hope most people would want to wake up and look back and say, I'm better, you know, I'm further along.
And did I miss the sessions once I stopped? Of course. You are paying somebody so that you can just go talk and spill everything.
Yeah.
They're legally obligated to keep your secrets.
Right.
How many, like we all have great friends.
Right.
But even we don't tell all of our best friends every detail about our life.
Yeah.
So to have someone that you're paying to literally just go spill everything to,
Right.
and they'll give you advice on everything professionally, that's awesome. It's
pretty good.
And as much as I said you don't want to build a friendship, there is a relationship there.
Absolutely.
I mean, this guy and every counselor does this. In the 25, 30 sessions we've been in, he had a notebook like this thick.
Just on you.
Just on me.
Yeah.
Every time I would mention, my cousin and I went to the movies last week. Which cousin? Which side? Oh, my mom's side. And he'd scroll back through and he goes, oh, so-and-so?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, yeah. Because he wrote it. Not that he's memorized
Right.
my life. But he writes it down. Like that's really nice. And again, as humans, we like just being talked about and cared about that much.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the temptation to keep going is you still think you may need help.
Absolutely.
And again, like never stop too early.
Yeah.
Especially if the means for it.
Yeah.
But I felt like it was a great time to land the plane for me.
That's awesome. Last closing question you have for Bailey?
Would you think that you would need to go back anytime soon, or do you think you're on a good place right now to stay the course? So do you think that people spend life like going through different stages of counseling, or?
Yeah, I've definitely kept that option open. I still have that number saved. Like if I wanted to go back, I'd go to the same guy because he knows everything I went through before. But yeah, I've definitely kept that option open. I don't know what's professional and what's not specifically, but even if it's for a session, just, hey, I'm walking through this hard thing in life right now. And obviously my first thought is to seek wisdom from those I can seek wisdom from. But sometimes you do need professional help. Like, I just want to make sure I'm dealing with this correctly.
Yeah.
And I totally would be apt to that. I
very
don't think it would
proactive.
make me feel like I'm back to where I was when I quit counseling and I've grown since then. I don't think I'd feel like I've reverted at all.
I think that's such great advice, like, and which I hadn't even thought of really. You know, you go for a year or whatever, you know, maybe you are in a season where things are just working and whatnot, but, you know, think about a tune-up. Think about, you know, hey, we just need to meet. Like right now, I don't think many counselors would be like, unless you're going to sign up for 6 sessions, like it's like, yeah, come on in.
Well, and you're getting paid.
Right.
Like,
and so they get
I
paid
get
per
another
session,
client.
which, yeah, absolutely. But I think on the Christian side of things, I think Christian counselors would love that, that, hey, this guy cares enough about our relationship professionally that he values even 60 minutes with me, that there could be a quick word of advice or wisdom, or, you know, maybe I'm seeing something and that's I didn't even think about that. Just like
100%.
pop in and just get kind of, reminded of something or encouraged with
It's a great
something.
question. Yeah, I've definitely kept it open. I haven't really needed it yet.
Sure.
But who knows whether it's in a month or if it's in
You
3
will.
years.
Yeah, you will.
Exactly. So
We just spent a sweet session with Bailey Tonkinson talking about counseling, and again, we're loving this particular theme because we know that so many in the fraternity have gotten counseling, are in need of counseling, want to get counseling. And so keep listening to these episodes. We're going to have more people on telling us their stories, the highs and lows, the benefits, the challenges, the ins and outs, the details. But also we're going to have counselors on giving their side of it, where they sit, and advice and wisdom from them. Stay tuned for the next episode. Always remember, you're not alone in this. So thank you for joining us this episode. We'll see you next time.